إن الله عليكم السلام إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وعلى وعجل فرجه. Ya Allah, we all can be seated inshallah so we can begin. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما صل على محمد وعلى محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الأول بلا أول كان قبله والآخر بلا آخر يكون بعده ثم الصلاة والسلام على خير الأنام نبينا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين والبراءة من أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين. اللهم أنطقني بالهدى وألهمني التقوى ووفقني للتي هي أزكى. اللهم أخرجنا من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمنا بنور الفهم وافتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علومك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وصل اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين. Respected brothers, respected sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In yesterday's lecture, we began a discussion regarding the correct approach in dealing with ahadith, the narrations by the Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. We said that the two major sources from which we can derive our religious beliefs and values and principles are the Holy Quran and the Honorable Sunnah of the Holy Prophet. And the Honorable Sunnah of the Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt means their sayings, their actions, and their endorsements. And we said that there is a challenge that we face in this regard, and that is, we know for a fact that every verse in the Quran is the Quran, but we don't know that every single hadith reported in the narrations is in fact the actual Sunnah. Because we have two types of Sunnah. We have the actual Sunnah and we have the transmitted Sunnah. It is one thing to see the Prophet say something or do something, and it's another thing to hear that he did something or said something. The level of knowledge differs here. When I know the Prophet said something, this is called as-Sunnah al-Waqi'iyya, the actual Sunnah. There's no doubt this is the Prophet saying, this is the Imam saying, this is the Imam's action. But when it's transmitted and not transmitted with numerous reporters such that they would not collide or they would not conspire to fabricate something, I know that this is in fact a transmission that entails or engenders itmi'nan or certainty, then that makes the hadith as if I have seen the Prophet or heard the Prophet, because then I have certainty that the Prophet had said this. And we gave an example of which hadith that Muslims agree upon and that was mutawatir, was reported by numerous transmitters. Hadithul Ghadir. Not the entire sermon, the phrase. The entire sermon, there's differences. But the phrase that says, Man kuntu mawla fa aliyun mawla, or Man kuntu mawla fa hadha aliyun mawla, that is a mutawatir statement. Now, what is tawatur? Let me just say a brief word on tawatur just so that we can have a understanding of tawatur. Tawatur is a hadith that is reported, a mutawatir is a hadith that is reported by numerous narrators to the extent that makes it impossible for the narrators to have conspired to falsely describe or fabricate the hadith or ascribe the hadith to the Rasul in a fabricated fashion or in a false ascription. If somebody comes from a specific school of thought and reports the hadith, another person from another school of thought. And we're talking about the classes from the Rasulullah all the way until the times the books were compiled. Tawatur applies in this case of ahadith. This is just for your information. It applies in the tabaqat, in the classes and generations of transmitters from the time of the Prophet and for us as 12ers until the end of Al-Ghayba As-Sughra. So we're not looking for tawatur from 329 until today. That's already recorded. The books have been recorded by then. The books have been reported or recorded, in the 4th Hijri century. The books have been already recorded. But up until the books were reported, this is where we say, okay, is this hadith, has it been transmitted? We trace it back by numerous sources. And do these numerous sources, is there a possibility that they have come together to fabricate the hadith? Or you say there's no way, how could somebody from Al-Khawarij, somebody from the Shia, somebody from the Mu'tazila, somebody from the Asha'ira, all of them would come together to make up, would not serve their interests, right? So therefore we have a conclusion from a mutawatir hadith that there's no way it has been fabricated, and we are content, if not certain, that it is indeed a depiction of the actual sunnah. It represents the actual sunnah. So it's actual sunnah versus transmitted sunnah. Transmitted sunnah doesn't mean it's not actual. We just don't know that it's actual until we have enough evidence. But we have a different way of dealing with it, which we will mention inshallah as we highlighted yesterday, but I'll give more details inshallah. So now, the first point after this introduction that I want to remind you of is the difference between definite ascription and indefinite ascription. We said definite ascription is when someone says, I know for a fact Rasulullah said. Qala Rasulullah, there's no doubt. Indefinite ascription is when there's a good chance he said, I'm just not certain he said. So say it's reported that Rasulullah said. You hear us on the minbar always say, it is reported, it is narrated. We never say, Qala Rasulullah. Why? Because we don't know. We don't have that kind of, knowledge and certainty that this specific hadith was indeed said. Yes, some hadith we say, Qala Rasulullah. Hadith al-Thiqlain, Hadith al-Manzila, Hadith al-Ghadir. These are usually hadith that we are content enough to say, Qala Rasulullah. But other hadith, usually we say, it is reported. How do we deal with these plethora of ahadith? There are 3 levels, 3 stages. I have to repeat this because I want to make sure it settles so we can go further. 3 stages to dealing with ahadith. Stage number 1 is to try to establish the fact that they represent the actual sunnah, to establish that they are indeed said by the Holy Prophet. So we're looking for what? We're looking for mutawatir, hadith, tawatur. We're looking for a hadith that has enough contextual clues that can give us itmi'nan that it is also said by the Holy Prophet. So it's not just mutawatir that allows us and engenders in our hearts, in our minds, certainty or contentment. No, it could be a hadith that is not mutawatir, but it is surrounded by different clues. For example, if the hadith was reported in an asl. Asl is the original notebooks that were written by the companions of the A'imma. One of the companions is Zurara ibn A'yan. If we find this hadith in Zurara's book, the original book, not the copies, the original book. Let's say Shaykh al-Kulayni says, for example, I found this book, this hadith in the book of Zurara. And another alim says the same thing. This hadith was from the book of Zurara. So we have contentment that this hadith was indeed in the book of Zurara. And we know that the original book of Zurara has no fabrications, because Zurara only writes what he hears from Imam, let's say, As-Sadiq alayhi salam. So at this point, this is a clue that allows us to gain contentment that it is not a hadith that we are not sure has been said. We are close to almost sure that it has been said. So these are different ways by which a muhaddith or a jurist can verify and establish the definite sunnah, the definite hadith, the definite riwayah. Definite, we can say with confidence, yes, this happened. Rasulullah said this, Rasulullah did this, Rasulullah endorsed this. Something happened in front of him and he endorsed it, because his endorsement is also hujjah, binding upon us. His sunnah is not just what he says and what he does. His sunnah is also what he endorses. So if somebody in front of him acts in a specific way and the Prophet doesn't say anything without a reason not to say anything, we know that action is definitely permissible. Otherwise the Prophet would have commented. And taqiyya doesn't apply in the case of the Prophet. Taqiyya happened afterwards in the case of the Imam when the dhulm befell them. So now, the actual sunnah, the transmitted sunnah. Ascription, when we ascribe to Rasulullah or to the Ahlul Bayt a saying, an action, an endorsement, is either definite or indefinite. Most of our ascriptions are from the indefinite. The definite are a few compared to the indefinite. So that's the first stage. What happens when we cannot establish a specific hadith to be definite? Then we move on to the second stage. The second stage is the stage in which we want to establish the authenticity of the chain to establish hujjiyah, as we say. And let me explain this in a different way by raising a question. If I am not sure a hadith has been said by the Holy Prophet, meaning I don't have certainty, I have what's called dhann. Dhann is a high probability. Can I rely on that hadith? They call this hujjiyat khabar al-wahid. They study this in usul. Can we rely on khabar al-wahid? Khabar al-wahid it doesn't mean single report. It means a report that has not reached the level of tawatur. Can we rely on that hadith? Now, why are they asking that question? Because the ilm that you receive from that hadith is dhann, not ilm, not certainty. And I'll give you an example to show the difference between certainty and dhann. If I said to you that I saw the Imam and he told me to tell you this and this and that, something. Are you going to be certain that this is what exactly the Imam said? Or are you going to say, well, I trust this person, but as trusted as he is, there's a chance he would have misunderstood the Imam. There's a chance he reworded it and made mistake in how he conveyed it to me from the Imam. So is it the same as when the Imam tells it directly to you and you hear it from him in terms of the level of certainty that you'll receive? It's not the same. If you were to hear it directly from the Imam, you say, Wallahi, that's what the Imam said, and it's hujjah upon you. This is definite. You can go and tell everyone, Imam said this. But when I tell you, I heard my friend, heard his friend that met the Imam and said this and said that to him. We're talking during the time of hudur, of course. Now nobody can dare to say, I met the Imam and he said this to me. Anyhow, so what happens here? You receive what's called dhann. When you look and open a book, and the book says that Shaykh al-Kulayni received it from intermediary number 1, intermediary number 1 received it from intermediary number 2, number 3, number 4, Imam al-Sadiq. Question, can you say that I am certain Imam Sadiq said this with the 4 intermediaries? You say there's a high probability that he did, but I don't have certainty. Why? Because we have 4 or 5 intermediaries. There's a good chance that there's a mistake that happened, but there is a good likeliness due to the fact that these intermediaries are trusted, and a Shaykh al-Kulayni is a alim and he's trusted, then we are more content that more than likely, inshallah, it has been said by the Imam. But still, that is still dhann. That's good dhann, but it's not certainty. So we can't make definite ascription. We're going to say indefinite. We say high chance it has been said by the Prophet. Question, this high chance or high probability, dhann, is it hujjah? Because the Quran tells us in some matters, dhann does not suffice. إِنَّ الظَّنَّ لَا يُغْنِي مِنَ الْحَقِّ شَيْئًا وَلَا تَقْفُ مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ. Do not pursue or follow that which you have no knowledge of. This is where ulama come and they study this issue in further detail and tens of lessons just to establish the authority of al-dhann in certain matters in Islam. So they say, for example, we have proofs, evidence from the Quran, from the way of the Ahlul Bayt, from the ahadith that have been established, from uqala, that relying on the report that is not mutawatir is binding. In fact, we do that in our life. If we were to only accept reports in our daily life that we have saw with our own eyes or that we have yaqeen in, then we would not accept most of the things. You go shopping and you tell the person, for example, is this really your product? Or did you steal it and try to sell it to me? You don't even ask the question because you assume that what? They're selling you what they own, not what they usurped. Uqala, rational people, do not tell you, oh, you need to go verify that they didn't steal it. They don't even tell you that. So that means even without them stating to you that they purchased it, as if they state by placing it in their shopping, selling it to you, that this is mine, I'm selling it to you. But that's a single report. They don't have tawatur that many people saw this person buy the product from the market. You ask someone who you trust to go and slaughter a lamb for you in a halal way. You want to do aqiqah. And you give them the money, they go do it, and they come back and give you the meat. Is there a chance, at least 1%, that they could have done the biha wrong or lied and went and bought one that is not the biha? There's a chance, but there's a high likeliness that they didn't because you trust them. So you have dhann from that, but that dhann is still binding and acceptable by uqala. No one will reprimand you for not trying to get certainty because certainty is not even practical in many of these cases. So ulama concluded in matters of fiqh, legal matters, laws, rulings, where we cannot establish definite ascription, we cannot be certain that every single hadith in fiqh has been said by the ma'soom. They said in these matters we have enough evidence to substantiate that it is authoritative to rely on khabar al-thiqah, the report of the trusted, which only gives us a good dhann, it doesn't give us certainty. So the first stage where we can find certainty, we're good. But if we can't find certainty and we only can receive dhann because it's an indefinite, then we say, what are we going to use this in? Is it a fiqhi matter? If it's a fiqhi matter, we have enough evidence to substantiate that what? That we can rely on this dhann, khabar al-thiqah. And go further with you, a mujtahid, jurist that you emulate, when they deduce a law from the ahadith, from the Quran, the process they go through and the conclusion, do they tell you that this conclusion conforms with the actual ruling that Allah has written in Al-Lawh al-Mahfuz? They don't know that. They're not a ma'soom. They're doing their due diligence. There's a chance they make a mistake, and to prove that to you, we have different fatwas, right? Otherwise, everyone would have the same fatwa, if it all conforms with reality. So that is a dhann. The alim says, I have high likeliness that I have reached the actual ruling, but I'm not certain. So can we take dhann from him? He said, in religious, practical matters, yes we can. What about aqa'id? Now we said in fiqh, we don't have a problem in terms of dealing with hadith because we don't deal with them anyways. Who deals with them? The faqih. We're talking about the rest of the hadith about aqa'id, history, akhlaq, tafsir. How do we deal with these hadith is the question. Because we're not trying to take the job of the faqih because we are not a faqih. And at that point when you have a hadith and the hadith has a fiqhi content in it, then it is not to you to conclude and rely on. It is something that you hand over to whom? To the faqih. So it's not even your responsibility to deal with that. Can you read it for tabarruk? Yeah, there's no problem. You can read as many hadith as you like. But you cannot act according to them without referring to the jurist. You can't say, well, I opened Wasa'il al-Shia or al-Istibsar or al-Kafi and it says that I should do this in this case and I'm going to act accordingly. You say, hold on. Did you check with the faqih that you emulate? Because they're the ones that would verify the hadith, that would compare it to the Quran, compare it to other hadith and so on and so forth. So with fiqh, we resort and defer to whom? The jurist. Alaykum as-salam. As far as aqa'id, and here we have difference of views and different opinions. But I'm going to give you the opinion that is reliable in general, mashhur, the renowned, and at the same time, that which conforms with our reason. And that which many of our ulama, our current ulama, would agree upon. And that is, aqa'id are of two types. There are the fundamental creeds and then the details or the secondary creeds. The detailed creeds, which we are not responsible to know their specifics if they require further diligence and require going after them and dissecting different hadith, and it's not accessible to us. We're not required to go that far in the details. For example, what is the essence of ilm al-imam, the knowledge of the imam? We know the imam has special knowledge given to him by Allah, but what is the essence of it? What does it come down to? What are the details and nuances of that knowledge? We don't have to worry about that. When did the ma'soom receive this knowledge? From the time of birth, from the time of bulugh, from the time they become an imam? As long as in general you accept they have special ilm, that should suffice. But to go into these deep details that require diligence and further research, that's not necessarily wajib upon you to check in. Like the philosophical aspects or philosophical discussions with respect to divine attributes. In general, you know that Allah is absolutely perfect, no limitations to Him, all qualities of perfection apply to Him, He is not confined to any time or space. The basics, that suffices. But to go further into the philosophical discussions and the deep analysis of these matters is not really a responsibility of yours. So now the core beliefs, ulama say, cannot be established based on dhann. The same ruling that you receive from the hadith, which you said, I have dhann that the Prophet said, you can rely on because it's a practical matter. But a hadith comes from the Prophet that says, this is a belief that you need to believe in. You say, okay, I'm going to believe in this. Why are you going to believe in this? Oh, because there's a hadith that says the Prophet said this. But did you see the Prophet? No. So you're not definitely sure this hadith was said by the Prophet. It's a hadith that gives you dhann. Can you rely on dhann in aqa'id? No, because aqa'id are your underlying principles, bedrocks of your deen. They have to be firm. They can't be shaky. And therefore, you can't rely on just an indefinite ascription. Yes, you're going to look for different clues, different riwayat, maybe you reach tawatur, maybe you reach istifada, different ways by which you can establish at least for yourself that this hadith is indeed a hadith that can be said or can be attributed with definite attribution to the Holy Prophet ﷺ. Now, how do we go about that if we choose to? If we want to, alaykum salam. Because alhamdulillah, all of our core beliefs are established through reason, through the Holy Quran, which both are, alhamdulillah, available to us. Yes, in terms of certain aspects, in further elaboration, we definitely need the sunnah, we need the ahadith, we need the sayings of the Prophet, the sayings of the Imam alayhi salam. But how do I verify these sayings if I am not definite? This is where I need the help of ulama, not in the sense of emulating them. No, in the sense of, alaykum salam, in the sense of what? In the sense of allowing them to convince me and provide to me how this hadith can be relied on. And this is up to me. If I am convinced after they have presented to me this hadith and that hadith, and I gave an example last night, who can remember? Which hadith? Hadithul Manzila, right? Now we said Hadith al-Manzila says what? Anta minni bimanzilati Haruna min Musa. The Prophet tells Ali alayhi salam, you are to me like Aaron was to Moses alayhi salam, alayhi salam. Wa ala nabina wa alayhi. And we said that how do we verify this hadith was said by the Prophet, since we are not experts in hadith and at the same time we're not definite about it. This is where the alim would come and say, look, this hadith has been reported in such book and accepted by the non-Shia Muslimin as a verified and a reliable hadith, despite the fact that it goes against their way of establishing. In other words, it does not serve their belief system. So they don't have a reason to include such hadith. And then they give you other contextual clues, and they give you other ways to tell you that this hadith is indeed from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wa alihi. That now you have contentment, itmi'nan, that okay, this hadith is definitely said by Rasulullah. But then you go to the meaning of the hadith, and this is where they explain to you, and they tell you, go to the Quran and see what the Quran gave Aaron in manazil with respect to Musa. What were the positions of Aaron with respect to Musa? And you'll find that he's a wazir, basically the minister, alaykum salam. And you find that he is what? He's a khalifa. وَخْلُفْنِي فِي قَوْمِي. So he's a khalifa, he's a wazir, and he's a sharik. He's a partner in the risala. And therefore you conclude that Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam was the partner and the wazir and the sharik in the message of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam based on this hadith. Then you receive this itmi'nan, if not certainty, that the indication of this hadith that the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has assigned and appointed Ali by the permission of Allah, because Musa alayhi salam could not appoint Harun without the permission of Allah. Therefore, in this case, Ali was appointed by Allah to be the Khalifa, the partner, and the Wazir, except one station that Ali does not have in this case, إِلَّا أَنَّهُ لَا نَبِيَ بَعْدِي, because prophethood has been sealed. So, just in case someone might come and say, well, you said he's like Aaron to you, Aaron to Moses, Ali to you is like Aaron to Moses, and we know that Aaron was a prophet, so Ali's a prophet. He says, no, this one is an exception, because prophethood has been sealed. So now from this you see that the faqih and the scholar that presented this for you or in front of you didn't say to you, accept from me that Ali is the first Khalifa because I said so, alaykum salam. He didn't say that to you. He said, here's the evidence. But with practical matters, he doesn't have to do that. Number one suffices in practical matters, as we just said. Number two, it is not practical to present to you the evidence of fiqh, because the evidence of aqa'id are much easier to deal with and can easily be understood by the layman or a layperson and common individual who's not an expert in these sciences. But when it comes to jurisprudence, it is very complicated. One mas'ala could require a 30-page research full of technical terms and full of analysis and discussions and opinions of other ulama. How would you'll be lost. It's like a doctor, a physician who has written a scholarly article about, for example, heart problems, scholarly, full of technical terms and full of different types of principles that are accepted in the medical field. And I, as a layperson in the medical field, I come and I read it, I get lost. I'll understand a couple of words here and there, but I won't understand the gist and the whole essence of this article. So therefore, in jurisprudence, we give the hadith to whom? To the faqih. And aqa'id, we said if it's a fundamental creed, we have to read the ahadith, read what ulama have said about the ahadith, compare it against other ahadith, compare it against the Quran. In the end, ulama have helped us to understand these ahadith and to see whether we can receive contentment, itmi'nan, from these ahadith about a specific aqidah, so that we can believe and embrace it, or not receive itmi'nan and not embrace it. We have so many ahadith that talk about aqidatul raj'ah, the return of the A'imma alayhim salam and the Prophet. And ulama have different takes on it. Some have been convinced and certain, and they will provide to you why they receive certainty from these ahadith. And you can read the clues, because what they do is they provoke and stimulate your mind to see what they are seeing. Taqleed is here, take it, act accordingly. No, but when it comes to explaining the ahadith of aqa'id or the ayat in Quran and tafsir, they're stimulating your mind to see what they see, which you may not see at first glance. Like they are your sharper set of eyes, they're your telescope that allow you to see what cannot be seen with normal eyes. They just tell you, here, come see. Look, 1, 2, 3, 4. If you receive contentment, itmi'nan, ilm, then you can embrace that belief. That's why we need our ulama, even with respect to explaining the hadith and verifying them with this respect. Now, we're moving on to tafsir. Tafsir, we said, is a little bit complicated. The ahadith of tafsir, most of the times, are not hadith that actually explain the literal meaning of the verse, or the aspects of the verse that require, for example, the Arabic language and the understanding of the indications and the meanings of the verse. They usually tend to delve to the application more than explaining the actual meaning. For example, this verse applies to this imam. This verse applies to al-Mahdi. This verse applies to, the enemies of the Ahl Bayt alayhim salam. They would give you inner layers and esoteric bawatin and inner meaning of the holy verse, which does not again, does not give you the overall meaning of the verse. It gives you different aspects. The problem is that these ahadith in most of the times are not easily established, because we can't say that the ma'soom said, when we are not sure that he said, that the ayah has this inner meaning. But we can take inspiration and say, we'll reflect on that saying, and if it is supported by other ahadith, supported by other ayat, by the understanding of mufassirin that are reliable, from all this together we may receive itmi'nan that this riwayah has a content, a meaning that can be said to be reliable in a sense. Or we can receive itmi'nan, some of us, if not certainty, that this meaning indeed conforms with the intended or with the actual meaning that has been said by the ma'soom, or that relates to the ayah. So to summarize, with respect to tafsir and with respect to fiqh, who do we hand over the job to mostly? To the fuqaha. They have to deal with these ahadith and give us conclusions. But with tafsir, we are not bound to take their conclusion and emulate them, because if it's not a practical matter, if it's like, for example, about a verse that talks about Musa and Al-Khidr, let's say, and they're saying, they give their perspective on it. Their perspective, you don't have to emulate and accept it, but you can read their explanation, they stimulate your mind, and then you might be convinced about what they're saying, and your convincement and your itmi'nan and your certainty is what is binding and hujjah upon you, not what he said per se, as opposed to fiqh. Now we come to what? To ethics. Ethics is the easiest one to deal with, and this is where we should put more focus on when we read hadith. Akhlaq. You know, like when you look at the maxims of Nahj al-Balagha, maxims of wisdom and Durar al-Hikam, the hadith in Tuhaf al-Uqud, a lot of them that revolve around being righteous, that give you wisdom, that gives you the keys to success in life. It has nothing to do with that which is obligatory or haram or mustahab or makruh. It doesn't establish a new aqidah. It just tells you details, and it stimulates your mind and your spirit, and it admonishes you and creates a sense of God awareness and God consciousness, and makes you love Allah even more and want to be a more righteous person, reminds you of the world after death, and all these things together that contribute to your spiritual well-being. Ulama say, as long as, number one, you are not certain that it's fabricated, you don't know that it's fabrication. If you know it's fabrication, you need to leave it. Number two, you do not have to check the chain of that hadith, because you said, well, I'm not an expert, what do I do? He says, check the content, which is the third stage that we didn't talk about. We mentioned yesterday. Is we look at the content and we compare it against the Holy Quran. Does it match the Quran or does it contradict the Quran? You know, for example, we know that sidq, being truthful in our daily affairs, is a value, a Quranic value, and it has been established in even the authentic and definite hadith. But if I come across a riwayah, for instance, that I don't know the chain of, I have no idea from which book it came, but it just also praises sidq, and it asks me to be truthful, and it encourages people to be truthful with one another. Can I say that, well, because I don't know the chain of this narration, I am not an expert in hadith, I'm going to dismiss it? No, but I cannot make definite ascription. I can't say Rasulullah said, Al-Imam al-Hussein said, no. This is where I say it is reported in one of the books, or in the specific book, in Ghurur al-Hakam, for example, that the commander of the faithful said this. Yes. Can I make use of it? Yes. Why am I permitted to rely on it? Well, because it conforms with that which has been already established. It's not giving me new information. It's not trying to establish something new that needs to be proven. It is already proving that honesty is a virtue. So a hadith that comes just to support it, or a story that comes to support it, should not be a problem in terms of us, acting according to it, conveying it, narrating it to other people. There's no issue in that at all. As long as we do not narrate it with what? Definite ascription. We say, indeed Rasulullah said. No, we said it is reported that Rasulullah had said. It is reported in Ghurur al-Hikam, in Nahj al-Balagha, in Al-Kafi, that the Imam said. As far as history, and this is a little bit different, and I don't want to get into the details, as seems like I'm running out of time, but in terms of history, all I can tell you is that ulama do not look for authenticity when they look at historical ahadith. In fact, most historical ahadith when you put them on the scale of authenticity as in chain, most of them were not pass the sahih and da'if criteria. Most of them will not pass. Why? Because most of the times history is reported by everyone. In fact, the history that we have today, a lot of it is reported by the opponents of the Ahl Bayt alayhim salam. So we can't say that every single... Those who fought our beloved Imam Hussein in Karbala also reported the event. Can you consider them to be trustworthy? Of course not, because they fought the Imam. How could they be trustworthy? They're fusaq. But can we say that everything they report is false? No. So what do we do with these ahadith? This is where ulama say we have to look for enough clues about a specific event to establish. With the ni'mah and grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the fundamental and the most major events are not disputed in history. There's no doubt. Imam Ali was struck on the 19th of the month of Ramadan. There's no doubt about history in this matter. Imam Hussein was killed in Karbala. His children were taken as captives. These are events in history that there's no discussion. You don't need to go about the chain and figure out, because these are clear. They're almost mutawatir. But then it's usually the details that give people a hard time. And these details, if they're not related to a hukum, you're not going to establish a ruling or a new aqidah, then you're not responsible to deal with them. And if you want to deal with them, you look at the books of ulama that give you certain clues that this event is indeed, the detail of that event is true, or the detail of that event is not true. This is what we call extra work that is not obligatory upon you. What is obligatory is the minimum. You know that the major events took place and there's no dispute about them. So when you put all this into perspective, you have a general idea of how you can deal with the ahadith. You have to first categorize them. What is the subject and how I deal with the subject before you go into the details and the nuances. Yes, I can tell you for practical reasons, most of the ahadith of akhlaq you can read and you can benefit from, because you can see that most of them conform with our value system in Islam. But when you run by a hadith that seems to be fishy, you can't reject it. Law that is very important that we keep in mind. A hadith that sounds fishy or that you're not sure of, you cannot reject it, but you cannot accept it. What do you do to it? You put it to the side. You say Allah knows. So if you run across a hadith that seems very suspicious or something that you cannot observe or fathom, or seems like it's contradictory to the Quran, it seems, you're not sure, it seems, you cannot reject it because it could have been said in the case of taqiyya, could have been said for a specific reason, or it is intended, or something else was meant by it. So therefore you can't just reject. So there's also some people that say, you know what, I don't like this hadith. This is not said by the Ahlul Bayt. Why? Because it doesn't make sense to me. Well, maybe I have a problem understanding it. It doesn't mean it hasn't been said by the Ma'asum alayhi salam. So leave it to the side. Leave it to the side. But if hadith has clear contradiction, some hadith, for example, that let's say offend certain people of color, some hadith that could perhaps offend people of different ethnic backgrounds. Do we have such a hadith? Yeah, they're there. But ulama do not take them. They do not consider them to be reliable. So what do they do to them? Put them to the side. Because Islam is about not differentiating between this ethnic background or that ethnic background. You know, whether you're white, whether you're black, whether you're Arab, you're non-Arab. In the end, akramakum inda Allah atqakum. The most honorable with Allah among you is the most righteous. So if I come across a hadith that says to me a racist comment about someone because of their color, it's one thing if the racist comment is about, and another racist thing, the comment is about their behavior as a group, as opposed to them as a race. This is where it becomes a problem. This is where ulama say, okay, we can't take this hadith. Why? Because it violates the standards of the Quran and the standards of Islam. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين. I apologize, I cannot take questions tonight because I ran out of time and we are getting ready for iftar. So inshallah, if we can start helping to remove the chairs so we can get ready for salah. Fatiha for al marhumin with a loud salawat.
آمنت بالله لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. يا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. يا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. اللهم صل على محمد. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. أشهد أن عليا أمير المؤمنين وأولاده المحصومين بالحق حجج الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله. وأفلح من صلى على سيدنا وحبيب قلوبنا محمد وآل محمد.
صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر وما أدراك ما ليلة القدر. ليلة القدر خير من 1000 شهر. تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر. سلام هي حتى مطلع الفجر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم أقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا، حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده، سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده، سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده، سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده، سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده، سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده، سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله كما هو أهله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وتقبل شفاعته وارفع درجته. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده، سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده، سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده، سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده، سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده، سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده، سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضعيف. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله، بسم الله وبالله، الأسماء الحسنى كلها لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. يا علي يا عظيم، يا غفور يا رحيم، أنت الرب العظيم الذي ليس كمثله شيء وهو السميع البصير. وهذا شهر عظمته وكرمته وشرفته وفضلته على الشهور، وهو الشهر الذي فرضت صيامه علي، وهو شهر رمضان الذي أنزلت فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان، وجعلت فيه ليلة القدر وجعلتها خيرا من 1000 شهر. فيا ذا المن ولا يمن عليك، من علي بفكاك رقبتي من النار، في من تمن عليه وادخلني الجنة برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. حي على الصلاة، حي على الصلاة، حي على الفلاح، حي على الفلاح، حي على خير العمل، حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة، قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألهاكم التكاثر حتى زرتم المقابر. كلا سوف تعلمون، ثم كلا سوف تعلمون. كلا لو تعلمون علم اليقين لترون الجحيم، ثم لترونها عين اليقين، ثم لتسألن يومئذ عن النعيم. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد، الله الصمد، لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم عرفني نفسك، فإنك إن لم تعرفني نفسك لم أعرف نبيك. اللهم عرفني رسولك، فإنك إن لم تعرفني رسولك لم أعرف حجتك. اللهم عرفني حجتك، فإنك إن لم تعرفني حجتك ضللت عن ديني. يا الله يا رحمن يا رحيم يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلبي على دينك. وصل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الحمد لله كما هو أهله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد، وتقبل شفاعته وارفع درجته. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. يا خفي الألطاف نجنا مما نحذر ونخاف وصل على سيدنا محمد وآله الأشراف. الله أكبر. والحمد لله بسم الله وبالله الأسماء الحسنى كلها لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
اللهم صل على محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم ادخل على أهل القبور السرور. اللهم اغن كل فقير. اللهم اشبع كل جائع. اللهم اكس كل عريان. اللهم اقض دين كل مدين. اللهم فرج عن كل مكروب. اللهم رد كل غريب. اللهم فك كل أسير. اللهم اصلح كل فاسد من أمور المسلمين. اللهم اشف كل مريض. اللهم سد فقرنا بغناك. اللهم غير سوء حالنا بحسن حالك. اللهم اقض عنا الدين وأغننا من الفقر إنك على كل شيء قدير. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام على الحسن المجتبى والحسين الشهيد بكربلاء، السلام على التسعة أئمة المسلمين من ذرية الحسين، علي السجاد ومحمد الباقر وجعفر الصادق وموسى الكاظم وعلي الرضا ومحمد الجواد علي الهادي والحسن العسكري والحجة الخلف القائم المهدي، صلاة كثيرة دائمة.